Hey Reddit, I'm not usually the type to spill my life story here, but man, this is one of those you can't make this up situations. I'm 38, been married to my wife, Ashley, for 10 years. We've got two amazing kids, a big old house in the suburbs, and what I thought was a pretty solid life. Sure, we've had our ups and downs. Who hasn't? But I never thought I'd find myself questioning everything like this. It all started a couple of months ago when I decided to throw a Christmas party at our place. My family and I don't exactly have the tightest bond. We're more of the see you at the occasional holiday kind of crew. But this year, I figured why not? I'd worked my butt off for years to give my family the best, and I wanted to show everyone how far I'd come. So, I invited the whole gang, siblings, parents, cousins, even my younger brother, Brandon, who's always been kind of a loose cannon. The party itself was a hit. The house was decked out in lights, the kids were running around, and the wine was flowing. I'll admit, I went a little overboard on the drinks. Okay, a lot overboard. By the end of the night, I was that guy, the one cracking cheesy jokes and giving long-winded toasts nobody asked for. Ashley, as always, played the perfect hostess. She was charming, attentive, and made sure everyone felt welcome. Watching her that night, I couldn't have been prouder, or so I thought. Fast forward to the next morning. I woke up with a killer headache and a vague memory of Brandon sticking around late after most people had left. Ashley mentioned something about cleaning up after the party, but I was too groggy to think much of it. I didn't know it then, but that night would end up being the start of my personal horror story. After seeing that text from Brandon, I couldn't let it go. Every time I looked at Ashley, I felt this sick mixture of doubt, anger, and fear swirling in my gut. Part of me wanted to just ask her about it, straight up, but then I thought, what if I'm wrong? What if it's nothing, and I blow up our whole marriage over a misunderstanding? Instead, I decided to dig. That night, after Ashley fell asleep, I slipped out of bed and grabbed her phone from the nightstand. Now, I'm not proud of this, okay? I know snooping isn't exactly the high road, but something in me, call it intuition, call it desperation, needed answers. Her phone was locked, of course, but I knew the passcode. Pro tip: don't use your birthday as a lock screen code if you got a spouse who remembers stuff. I went straight to her messages, and my heart started racing. I found the thread with Brandon almost immediately. At first, it was just casual stuff, jokes, memes, comments about the Christmas party. But then, about 2 weeks before the party, the tone shifted. The messages started getting flirty. Brandon would compliment her looks, say things like, "You're seriously the prettiest woman I know. My brother's a lucky guy." She'd reply with a laughing emoji or a modest "stop it." And then came the night of the party. My hands shook as I scrolled to the messages from that night. Sure enough, after most of the guests had left, the texts started pouring in. Brandon had sent, "Come to the guest room. I'll be waiting." My stomach turned. I kept scrolling, hoping to find some sort of explanation, some sign that she'd brushed him off or told him to knock it off. Instead, I saw her reply, "Just a few minutes. I'll make an excuse." I put the phone down and just stared at the wall for a while. I wanted to believe there was some reasonable explanation for all of this. But what could it possibly be? The messages didn't lie. She'd met Brandon in the guest room that night. My brother. My wife. Under the same roof where my kids were sleeping. I felt like I was going to throw up. I didn't confront her that night. I couldn't. I put her phone back on the nightstand and crawled into bed, lying there in the dark, staring at the ceiling while she slept peacefully beside me. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. If Ashley and Brandon thought they were slick, I'd show them just how wrong they were. I spent the next day in a fog, running on pure adrenaline and bottled-up rage. Ashley acted like everything was normal, chatting with the kids, humming along to the radio while she made lunch, even throwing in a "love you" as I left for work. It was almost enough to make me doubt what I'd seen on her phone. Almost. But then I thought about that text, "Come to the guest room. I'll be waiting," and the way she had so casually replied. Nope. There was no way this was a misunderstanding. At work, I couldn't focus. My mind was spinning, trying to figure out how to handle this without tipping her off. I didn't want to confront her just yet. I needed more proof. Something undeniable. Something she couldn't wiggle her way out of with excuses or crocodile tears. That's when I had an idea. I went out during my lunch break and bought a small voice recorder. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, But I figured if Brandon and Ashley were still, sneaking around, they'd slip up eventually. I placed the recorder in our bedroom, hidden deep in a drawer where Ashley wouldn't think to look. It didn't take long for my suspicions to pay off. The next evening, while I was upstairs tucking the kids into bed, I heard Ashley on the phone downstairs. She was speaking in hushed tones, but her laughter carried up the stairs, soft, playful, the way she used to laugh with me. When I came back down, she quickly ended the call. "Oh, that was just Megan," she said, not even making eye contact. Classic Ashley. I played it cool, pretending I didn't notice anything, but as soon as she went to take a shower, I grabbed the voice recorder from the drawer. My hands shook as I pressed play. Sure enough, her conversation wasn't with Megan. It was Brandon. "Ashley, I can't stop thinking about the party. When can we make it happen again?" "Brandon, soon. Just let me know when he's out of the house." I stopped the recording there, too disgusted to listen any further. It was one thing to suspect, another to see the text. But hearing her voice, hearing her plan this whole thing with my brother, it hit different. I knew it was time to ACT by the time I went to bed that night. I'd made up my mind. It was time to confront Ashley. No more sneaking around. No more waiting for her to dig herself deeper. I had the texts. I had the recording. And I had the burning rage of a husband betrayed by the two people he should have been able to trust most. The next morning, I waited until the kids were at school. Ashley was in the kitchen, sipping her coffee and scrolling on her phone like it was just another normal day. I stood there in the doorway, watching her, my fists clenched at my sides. How could she look so relaxed, so unbothered after what she'd done? "We need to talk," I said, my voice low but steady. Ashley looked up startled. "Okay. What's up?" I walked over and set my phone on the counter, pulling up the recording. "You want to tell me why you were planning a repeat performance with Brandon?" Her face went pale. For a moment, she just stared at me, like she couldn't quite process what I'd just said. Then, she started laughing, a short, nervous laugh that made my blood boil. "What are you talking about?" she said, shaking her head. "Are you feeling okay?" I pressed play on the recording. As soon as her voice filled the room, all the fake bravado drained from her face. She reached for the phone, but I snatched it away before she could grab it. "No, Ashley," I snapped. "You're not going to gaslight your way out of this one." I heard everything. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, and then the tears started. "It's not what you think," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "Oh, really?" I shot back. "So, when you said let me know when he's out of the house, you were talking about what? Hosting a charity event?" "Spare me, Ashley." "It was a mistake," she cried, her voice cracking. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I thought I could stop, but what?" I yelled, slamming my hand on the counter. "You liked it? You thought you could just keep sneaking around behind my back, and I'd never find out?" She shook her head, her tears falling faster. "I didn't know how to tell you. You've been so busy with work, and I felt invisible. And then Brandon, he was just there. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Her excuses hit me like a slap in the face. Invisible? Was that supposed to justify hooking up with my brother? I stood there for a long moment, staring at her as she cried. Part of me wanted to scream, to break something, to do anything to release the pressure building in my chest. But instead, I just turned and walked out of the kitchen. "You disgust me," I said over my shoulder. "We're not done with this, Ashley. Not by a long shot." I walked out of the kitchen and straight into my home office, slamming the door behind me. My head was spinning, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I knew I couldn't stay in that room forever, but I needed a minute to process. My wife, the woman I'd trusted with my life, had just admitted to cheating on me. And with Brandon, my own brother. The audacity of it all was overwhelming. Not only had they betrayed me, but they had done it under my roof during a family Christmas party while our kids were asleep upstairs. It wasn't just the affair that hurt. It was the sheer disrespect of it. About an hour later, I heard a soft knock on the door. "Can we talk?" Ashley's voice was muffled, shaky. I didn't respond at first. I was too angry to even look at her. But then I realized I couldn't avoid this conversation forever. I opened the door and stepped aside, letting her in. She looked like a mess. Eyes red and puffy, face pale, hair all disheveled. "Say whatever you've got to say," I said, crossing my arms. "And make it quick." She started crying again, big ugly sobs that I wasn't sure were genuine or just a ploy to soften me up. "I don't know how to fix this," she said. I've messed up so badly, and I hate myself for it. But I need you to know that I love you. I've always loved you." I scoffed. "Love me? You got a funny way of showing it, Ashley. You think I'm supposed to just forget what you did because you're standing here crying?" She shook her head, her voice breaking. "No, I don't expect that. I don't know what to do. I feel like I've ruined everything." "You have ruined everything," I snapped. "Do you even realize what you've done? You didn't just hurt me. You've destroyed this family. How am I supposed to explain this to the kids? To our families? How am I supposed to trust you ever again?" She opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "And let's not forget Brandon," I added, my anger boiling over again. "What was it about him, huh? Was it the thrill of sneaking around? Or was it just because he's not me?" Her eyes widened, and for a second, I thought she might try to deny it again. But instead, she just looked down at the floor, defeated. "I don't know," she whispered. "It just happened." I laughed bitterly. "No, Ashley, it didn't just happen. You made a choice. Over and over again. For weeks or months, for all I know. Don't act like this was some accident." The silence that followed was deafening. She stood there looking like she wanted to say something else, but I was done listening. "Get out," I said, pointing to the door. "What?" "You heard me. Get out. Go to your mom's. Go to a hotel. I don't care. But I can't look at you right now." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded, wiping her tears as she turned to leave. As the door closed behind her, I felt a wave of relief, mixed with a crushing sense of loss. The house was quiet now, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like the beginning of something much darker. With Ashley out of the house, I had some breathing room to clear my head, or at least try. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Ashley wasn't the only one who betrayed me. Brandon had played his part too, and honestly, that part stung even worse. He wasn't just some random guy. He was my brother. My blood. I knew I couldn't leave this unresolved. I needed to confront him, to hear what kind of garbage excuses he'd come up with. So, I grabbed my phone and called him. It rang twice before he picked up. "Yo, what's up?" he said, sounding way too casual for someone whose life was about to implode. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold. "Okay. About what?" "Don't play dumb, Brandon. You know exactly what this is about." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then he sighed. "Look, if this is about Christmas..." "It's not just about Christmas," I shouted, cutting him off. "It's about you sneaking around with my wife. How long has this been going on? Huh? How long have you been stabbing me in the back?" Whoa, calm down," he said, his tone shifting to defensive. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." "Proportion?" I echoed, incredulous. "You slept with my wife, Brandon, under my roof, at a family party, while my kids were upstairs. And that's just the part one know about. So, unless you want me to come over there and beat the truth out of you, you'd better start talking." Another long pause. Then, in the most infuriatingly smug voice, he said, "All right, fine. Yeah, it happened. But it's not like I forced her or anything. She came to me, man. If you want to be mad at someone, maybe start with yourself." I saw red. "Are you kidding me right now? You're really going to stand there and blame me for your disgusting behavior?" "She was lonely, bro," he continued, his tone still annoyingly casual. "You're always working, always too busy for her. She needed someone, and I was there. End of story." "Oh, there's going to be an end," I growled. "But it's not going to be the one you think." "Look, I get that you're upset," he said, like he was trying to sound reasonable. "But let's not blow this up into some big family drama, all right? Let's just move on and... move on." I snapped. "You destroyed my marriage, you piece of garbage. You think I'm just going to move on and let you get away with this?" Before he could respond, I hung up. My hands were shaking, my heart racing. Talking to him had only made things worse. His arrogance, his complete lack of remorse. It was like pouring gasoline on a fire. I didn't know what my next move was going to be, but one thing was certain. Brandon wasn't going to walk away from this unscathed. After that call with Brandon, I knew I couldn't let this slide. The audacity of him trying to blame me for his disgusting behavior. It was like he thought he was untouchable. And Ashley? She hadn't even tried to deny it. They both acted like I was just supposed to roll over and take it. Well, they had another thing coming. I spent the next couple of days gathering myself, thinking carefully about my next move. I wasn't about to go full scorched earth without a plan. If they wanted to treat me like I was blind, like I wouldn't see their betrayal coming, I'd show them just how wrong they were. The first step was getting more evidence, just in case Ashley decided to play the victim later on or Brandon tried to gaslight me to the rest of the family. I already had the recording and the texts, but I wanted to make sure I had everything locked down. I went through our shared computer and found backups of Ashley's phone. Bingo! It didn't take long to find more messages between her and Brandon. Some were from before the Christmas party, and others, well, let's just say they made my blood boil all over again. They talked about sneaking around, laughing at how clueless I was, and even joked about their Christmas miracle. I also found a whole folder of photos. They weren't explicit, but the selfies of the two of them together, smiling, cozy, like they were a real couple, were enough to make me want to punch a hole through the wall. Once I had everything saved, I called my best friend Mike. Mike's the kind of guy you want in your corner. Loyal, no nonsense, and always ready to go to bat for you. I needed someone to talk me down and make sure I didn't do anything impulsive. When I told him what happened, he was silent for a moment. Then he said, "All right, man. First off, screw both of them. You don't deserve this. Second, what's the plan?" "I'm still working on it," I admitted. "But I'm not letting them get away with this." "You shouldn't," Mike said. "But don't let them drag you down either. Whatever you do, make it smart." That's when it hit me. If Brandon and Ashley wanted to sneak around and act like they were untouchable, I'd shine a spotlight on their little game. The next day, I reached out to my parents. I didn't go into full detail yet, but I told them I had something serious to discuss at a family meeting. They were surprised but agreed to host it at their house the following weekend. In the meantime, I made sure to keep my cool around Ashley. She'd text me a couple of times from her mom's house, saying things like, "We need to talk," or "I want to fix this," but I ignored her. She had no idea what I was planning, and I intended to keep it that way. The day of the family meeting arrived, and I showed up with copies of everything. The texts, the recording, the photos. I was calm, collected, and ready to blow their lies sky high. When I arrived at my parents' house for the family meeting, the tension was already thick in the air. My mom had that worried, tight-lipped look she always got when she sensed something was wrong, and my dad was uncharacteristically quiet, just sipping his coffee and glancing between us. Brandon was already there, lounging on the couch like he didn't have a care in the world. He gave me a nod when I walked in, like we were still brothers, like he hadn't just obliterated any sense of loyalty between us. The sight of him made my blood boil, but I held it together. Ashley showed up a few minutes later, looking anxious. She kept glancing at me, probably wondering what I had planned. Good. Let her sweat. Once everyone was seated, I stood up and cleared my throat. "Thanks for coming," I began, keeping my voice calm. "I called this meeting because there's something we need to address as a family. Something serious." Brandon rolled his eyes. "Dramatic much?" he muttered, earning a sharp glare from Mom. I ignored him and turned to Ashley. "You want to start? Or should I?" Her eyes went wide. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "Of course you don't." I sighed and pulled out my phone, opening the folder of evidence. "Let me spell it out for everyone. Ashley and Brandon have been sneaking around behind my back. They've been lying to me, to this family, and I'm done pretending everything's fine." Mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Dad's face turned red, and he set his coffee down with a loud clink. Brandon sat up straighter, his smug grin disappearing. "What the hell are you talking about?" he said, his voice suddenly defensive. "Oh, you know exactly what I'm talking about." I snapped, flipping through the screenshots and holding one up for everyone to see. Text like this: "Brandon, come to the guest room. I'll be waiting. Care to explain?" Ashley looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she blurted out. "Don't even start." I cut her off. "You didn't mean for it to happen, but you sure didn't stop it, did you? You had every opportunity to come clean, but instead, you laughed about it behind my back." Brandon stood up, trying to play it cool. "This is ridiculous. You're blowing things way out of proportion. Nothing happened." I laughed bitterly. "Nothing happened? That's funny because I have recordings, texts, and photos that say otherwise. Do you want me to play the part where you two were planning your next little rendezvous? At that, Brandon's face turned pale, and he sat back down, his bravado completely gone. I trusted you, I said, my voice breaking slightly as I turned to him. You were my brother. I had your back through everything, and this is how you repay me? The room was silent except for Ashley's quiet sobs. Mom looked like she was about to cry, and Dad just shook his head, his disappointment radiating off him in waves. I didn't call this meeting to argue. I continued, regaining my composure. I called it to make sure everyone knows the truth. No more lies. No more secrets. If Brandon and Ashley want to keep playing their little game, that's on them. But I'm done being part of it. With that, I gathered my things and headed for the door. Wait, Mom called after me, but I didn't stop. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange sense of relief. The weight of their betrayal wasn't gone, but at least now, it wasn't just my burden to carry. After I left my parents' house, I drove around aimlessly, trying to process everything. The confrontation had gone exactly as I'd planned, if you count watching your family implode as going to plan. But now that it was over, I wasn't sure what to feel. There wasn't any satisfaction, no sense of victory, just emptiness. I turned off my phone for the rest of the day. I didn't want to hear from anyone, not Ashley, not Brandon, not even my parents. They probably spent the hours after I left arguing, dissecting everything I'd revealed. Part of me felt bad for dragging them into this mess, but what choice did I have? Brandon and Ashley had turned it into a family issue the moment they betrayed me. When I got home, the silence hit me hard. The house felt different now, like a stranger's place. I sat on the couch, staring at the spot where Ashley usually curled up with her tea. The memories of us laughing, talking, sharing life together, it all felt fake now, tainted by what I'd uncovered. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. I debated ignoring it but finally gave in. It was a text from my mom. We're here if you need us. Please let us know you're okay. I didn't reply. What could I say? That I wasn't okay? That I didn't know if I ever would be? The next morning, I finally turned my phone back on, and the flood of messages started pouring in. Ashley had texted me at least a dozen times, alternating between apologies and desperate attempts to explain. Brandon had only sent one. You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be. Let's talk. I deleted it without responding. Then there was another message from my dad. It was short, but it hit me harder than I expected. I'm sorry, son. Brandon's gone too far. We'll deal with him. I didn't know what deal with him meant, but the fact that my dad, usually the calm, level-headed one, was siding with me for once gave me a flicker of validation. Still, I wasn't ready to face any of them again. Instead, I decided to focus on myself and what came next. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. If Ashley wanted to cry about how much she'd ruined everything, I'd make sure she felt it where it counted. I wasn't about to let her walk away with half of everything I'd worked so hard to build. The second thing I did was reach out to a therapist. As much as I wanted to pretend I was fine, I wasn't. I needed someone to help me unpack all of this. Someone who could give me tools to deal with the anger and the betrayal, so I didn't end up drowning in it. By the end of the week, I'd started to feel a little more like myself. Not whole, not even close, but like I could at least function. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from Brandon. When my phone rang and I saw Brandon's name on the screen, I almost didn't answer. I didn't want to hear his voice, let alone whatever weak excuse or half-hearted apology he'd cooked up. But something in me, the part that still couldn't believe he'd done this, wanted to hear what he had to say. I let it ring a few more times before I picked up. What do you want? I said, my voice cold. Look, man, Brandon started, his tone surprisingly calm. I just want to talk. Can we meet up somewhere? No, I said flatly. Anything you have to say, you can say now. He hesitated, then sighed. Fine, I need you to hear me out. I messed up, okay? I know I did, but this whole thing got blown out of proportion. Blown out of proportion? I repeated, my voice rising. You slept with my wife, Brandon. You lied to me, to our family, and you got the nerve to say this is blown out of proportion? I know it sounds bad. It is bad. I snapped. Can you just let me finish? He shot back, his voice sharpening. I didn't plan for any of this to happen. Ashley and we didn't mean for it to go this far. It just happened. I let out a bitter laugh. Right? That's the go-to excuse, isn't it? It just happened. Like you tripped and fell into each other's arms. Give me a break. Okay, fine, he said, his frustration finally showing. I messed up, but you don't get to act like you're perfect either. You've been so busy with work and trying to impress everyone with your big house and fancy life that you didn't even notice what was going on right under your nose. Oh, so now this is my fault? I said, the anger bubbling up again. I'm not saying that, Brandon said quickly. I'm just saying, maybe if you weren't so caught up in your own world, Ashley wouldn't have felt so neglected. That was it. I saw red. You know what, Brandon? I hope you choke on that twisted logic of yours. Because nothing justifies what you did. You could have been a decent human being and talked to me, or better yet, stayed out of my marriage entirely. But no, you took the easy way out. And now you want to blame me for it? Screw you. There was silence on the other end. For a moment, I thought he'd hung up. Then he spoke again, his voice quieter. I didn't call the fight. I don't want to lose you as my brother. I laughed bitterly. Newsflash, Brandon. You lost me the second you decided to betray me. We're done. You're no brother of mine. Before he could say anything else, I hung up. I sat there for a while staring at the phone in my hand. Part of me wanted to believe that he was sorry, that maybe he really did regret what he'd done. But the bigger part of me knew better. Brandon wasn't apologizing because he cared about me. He was apologizing because he cared about himself and the mess he'd created. As far as I was concerned, he could live with the consequences that a couple of days after the call with Brandon, I thought I might finally have some peace. I'd cut him off, made my position clear to everyone involved, and started focusing on what my life would look like without either of them in it. But, of course, that peace didn't last. Ashley showed up at the house unannounced. I was in the middle of sorting through some documents for the lawyer when I heard the doorbell. At first, I thought it might be a delivery, but when I opened the door, there she was. Her face was puffy like she'd been crying, and she was clutching a box of tissues in one hand and what looked like a notebook in the other. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice small. I didn't want to let her in. Honestly, I didn't even want to see her face. But a part of me, maybe the part that still remembered the good times, was curious about what she had to say. 5 minutes, I said, stepping aside. She nodded and walked in, setting her notebook down on the kitchen counter. For a moment, she just stood there, fidgeting with the tissues and avoiding my eyes. "Well," I said, crossing my arms, "say whatever you came to say." She took a deep breath, then opened the notebook. Inside were pages and pages of handwritten notes. "I've been going to therapy," she said softly. "And I've been writing everything down, my thoughts, my feelings, everything I've done wrong. I know I hurt you. I know I destroyed your trust. But I'm trying to understand why I did what I did, so I can make sure it never happens again." I raised an eyebrow. "And you think writing some notes is going to fix this?" "No," she admitted, her voice breaking. I need you to know that I'm serious about changing. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I'm asking for one anyway. For us, for the kids. Please." I stared at her, trying to process her words. On one hand, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she was truly sorry and that maybe, just maybe, we could work through this for the sake of our family. But then I remembered the texts, the recording, the smug look on Brandon's face when I confronted him. I remembered the sheer disrespect of it all. The lies, the betrayal, the way she'd laughed behind my back. "I'm glad you're going to therapy," I said finally. "But that doesn't change what you did. You didn't just make a mistake, Ashley. You made a choice to betray me, to betray our family. And now, you have to live with the consequences." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded. "I know," she whispered, "but I don't want to give up on us." "Well, maybe you should have thought about that before you got involved with my brother," I said coldly. She flinched like I'd slapped her. For a moment, I thought she might lash out, but instead, she just picked up her notebook and started for the door. "Take care of yourself," she said quietly before walking out. As the door closed behind her, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me felt vindicated for standing my ground, but another part of me felt emptied. A few weeks passed after Ashley's desperate visit. For the most part, I avoided contact with her unless it was about the kids. She'd moved back in with her mom temporarily, and while things were tense, at least I didn't have to see her every day. I've been focusing on myself, working with my lawyer to sort out the logistics of a divorce, going to therapy, and spending as much time as possible with my kids. Life wasn't perfect, but I was starting to feel like I was gaining some stability. Then the twist came. It was a Tuesday morning when I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You need to know the truth." Normally, I would have just deleted something like that, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it, and what I saw made my heart stop. The email contained screenshots of a text conversation, not between Ashley and Brandon, but between Brandon and some woman named Lisa. In the messages, Brandon was bragging about the affair with Ashley, like he was proud of it. "Dude, you wouldn't believe how easy it was," one message read. She was practically begging for it. Another message said, "Yeah, it was great at first, but now she's getting clingy. Can't wait for this to blow over, so I can move on." My blood boiled as I read through the messages. Not only had Brandon betrayed me, but now he was trash-talking Ashley like she was nothing more than a conquest. It was sickening. At the bottom of the email, there was a short note. "I thought you should know what kind of person your brother really is. Lisa." I had no idea who Lisa was or how she got my email address, but I was grateful for the intel. As much as I hated what Ashley had done, I couldn't ignore the fact that Brandon had manipulated her too. I forwarded the email to Ashley without any context. Less than an hour later, she called me. "Did you see this?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Yeah," I said curtly. "What do you want me to say?" "I didn't know he felt that way," she said, sounding genuinely hurt. "I thought." "You thought what?" I interrupted. "That he actually cared about you? That he was going to ride off into the sunset with you? Wake up, Ashley. He used you, just like he used our family." She was silent for a moment, then said, "I'm sorry. For everything. I don't know how I let it get this far." "Neither do I," he replied. "But that's your mess to deal with now. I've got bigger things to worry about." When the call ended, I felt an odd sense of closure. For the first time, it wasn't just me pointing out the betrayal. Brandon's own words had exposed him. After the email and Ashley's call, I decided it was time to let my parents know about Brandon's latest move. They were already furious with him for the affair, but this was a new low. I forwarded the email to both of them, attaching a simple message, just in case you needed more proof of what kind of person Brandon is. The response was immediate. My mom called me less than 10 minutes later, her voice shaking with a mix of anger and heartbreak. "I can't believe this," she said. "How could he do this to you? To us?" "I don't know, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But you can't keep giving him the benefit of the doubt. He's not the guy you think he is." By the end of the call, it was clear my parents were done with Brandon. My dad, who rarely spoke out against anyone in the family, was especially furious. If he wants to live his life like that, he said, he can do it without dragging us down with him. The real fallout came a few days later. Brandon showed up at my parents' house, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit him. According to my mom, he strolled in like nothing had happened, probably expecting to sweet-talk his way back into their good graces. But this time it didn't work. My dad confronted him first, holding nothing back. "You betrayed your brother, you lied to this family, and now we find out you've been bragging about it like it's some kind of joke? You've got some nerve showing your face here." Brandon tried to defend himself, of course. "It's not what it looks like," he said, but my mom cut him off. "It's exactly what it looks like," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "You've broken this family, Brandon. I don't know who you are anymore." The argument escalated from there, with Brandon trying and failing to shift the blame onto everyone but himself. By the end of it, my parents told him they needed space and didn't want to see or hear from him until he got his life together. When I heard about it, I can't say I felt sorry for him. He'd made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. The twist? Brandon didn't just lose the support of our parents. He lost his job too. Apparently Lisa, the woman who'd emailed me, was someone he'd been stringing along at work, and when she found out about the affair, she reported him to HR. Between the personal drama and his unprofessional behavior, he was let go within a week. As much as I hate to admit it, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction hearing about his downfall. He thought he was untouchable, that he could do whatever he wanted without consequences. Well, karma had other plans. It's been a few months since everything went down, and honestly, life feels different. Not perfect, not easy, but lighter somehow. The storm is past, and I'm finally starting to see the horizon again. Ashley and I are officially done. The divorce papers are signed, and while it's been tough on the kids, I'm doing everything I can to keep their lives as stable as possible. We've had a lot of honest conversations, age-appropriate, of course, and I've made sure they know none of this is their fault. They've been my anchor through all of this, my reason to keep pushing forward when everything felt like it was falling apart. As for Ashley, she's still staying at her mom's. She's tried reaching out a few times, saying she wants to co-parent and make amends for the sake of the kids. I'm civil with her when I have to be, but that's where it ends. I don't hate her. I don't have the energy for that anymore, but I'll never trust her again. Brandon, on the other hand, is a different story. Last I heard, he moved out of town, probably hoping to leave the mess he made behind him. My parents haven't spoken to him since that blow-up at their house, and honestly, I don't think they plan to anytime soon. His job, his reputation, his relationship with the family, it's all gone. He did it to himself, and I don't feel bad for him. As for me, I'm focusing on rebuilding. Therapy has been a game changer, helping me unpack everything and figure out who I am outside of this chaos. I've started running again, picked up a few hobbies I'd let slip over the years, and even went out with some friends for the first time in forever. Looking back, the betrayal still stings. It's a scar that'll probably never fully fade. But I've learned something important through all of this. Betrayal doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. If there's one piece of advice I'd give to anyone going through something similar, it's this: don't lose yourself in the pain. Let yourself feel it, process it, and then let it go. Focus on what you can control. Your own growth, your own healing. Life has a way of surprising you, sometimes in the worst ways, but also in the best. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm finally in a place where I'm ready to find out. Thanks for sticking with me, Reddit. This has been one hell of a journey, but I'm coming out stronger on the other side. The end.